grow in. And so we contacted Granite State and we worked out 3 sessions currently. We might end up doing more, all based around Rigor. So today, Carolyn has the floor. And you know Carolyn, she's sort of where it all began.
Where it all began.
So I'm super happy with Carolyn and Granite State for coming and doing all this for us. So again, thank you. Absolutely.
Isn't it funny how time flies everywhere except for in school? Sometimes it flies. If you're the type of person who likes to follow along as we go, the slides are here. It's bit.ly/Rigor, HHES BMS. That's accessible to you anytime. And I just want to say thank you. I know that after a long day, it's winter out there today, you're ready to go home, and so I appreciate you being here, for being humble enough to know that we all have a next step in our learning, and for being willing to listen to me talk at you for about an hour. We're going to play a quick game, and I know it's annoying, but we do it to our kids all the time, so I feel like it's fine. The game is called Sucks and Rocks. You can play it with your kids, but you have to call it maybe like
Something else.
Stakes and Rocks or something. But so the game's called Sucks and Rocks, and what you're going to do is I'm going to show a topic, a controversial topic, and you kind of decide where you fall on the continuum of whether you think that topic totally sucks or really rocks, or maybe somewhere in between. So if you think new technology, so like a colleague or Liz comes in and says, hey, check out this new app or this new device, are you like, ugh, this sucks? You would stand over here. Or are you like, yes, sweet, this rocks? You would stand over there by Tammy, or somewhere in the middle. So you have to actually stand and go with your body. To do it. Not or wrong or somewhere in the middle. Be honest! Oh yeah, you gotta be honest. I love the one-word rule book that I read it over in the summer, like, it's horrible! Somebody's lying. Come on, someone's lying. Okay. Tell me why you're on the fence about new technology. Thank you for the honesty over here. Tell me why it's horrible for you.
That's it. That's
like this.
Okay, so it's challenging for you.
It'll take me, very
The
long.
time to learn it, yeah, absolutely. Tell me someone over here why it's awesome. Anybody?
It helps our students, some of them, get into a place where they feel comfortable.
Okay, so fun about access. And
It's fun.
Okay, fresh air break. Sucks?
I'm doing it because
Yeah, for the students are us.
All right, tell me. Someone over there, tell me what's so awesome about it.
Wait, for us or the students?
Oh, for the kids. Or for you, I guess. Or for you. For fresh air break tomorrow. Okay, get them ready to learn. We get a break.
They shake the sillies off.
Okay, tell me why it's awesome.
okay, I'll go. Right now, we're breaking inside because we got lockers. For us, we got lockers and learning the combination. And there was so much stress with the new schedule and getting from, okay, it's a green light day, where are we going? So right now, we're not fresh yet.
Right.
They're fresh in the room, believe me, they're fresh in the room. But
Homework.
homework?
Now I know.
I changed my tune. I used to say that. I used to say it right, but it doesn't.
Lots of people in the middle. Okay, over there, watch it also. Gentlemen,
What?
what is the question?
You're not average.
Homework?
Yo,
Wait, where does Rocky
You're not going to achieve anything without homework, ever.
okay.
Yeah, how so?
Huh?
Can you elaborate?
Yeah.
How so?
I mean, it just, I went to school a long time ago, and you had homework. You had to have homework. You're not going to learn numeracy, any of the new number facts. You're not going to learn anything without practice. Whether it's sports, I mean, every time
Without
you think
extended
about it.
practice.
How many times you tried that layup shot? How many times did you practice that layup shot?
So it's about
Same
extended
math.
practice for
It's
you.
extended.
Okay,
Exactly.
tell me why it's awful.
I'm only over here because I agree with homework, but it doesn't get done, so that's why.
Yeah, okay.
I'm kind of the same way.
That's kind
So
of.
many kids don't do it that if you average it into their grades, then you're grading them for something that you weren't able to monitor their progress on.
Right.
Or
So you
something
don't even
that their
know if it's
parents
valid,
did.
but somebody ever getting
Or the
zeros,
opposite,
that
right.
those that do it, you know?
Good point, good point. Last one, bathrobes.
Totally wrong.
Can someone please explain to me, when would you possibly wear a bathrobe?
Oh my God.
When you get out of the shower.
When you get out of the shower, when you get dressed, when you're ready for bed, you put your pajamas on. When is it?
When you get home from school and you're exhausted.
Tell me why that's awful, please. Tell them why they're awful.
Just a waste of clothes.
Yeah, it's a You're too hot. Okay, I was going to ask you about after school PD, but I won't. So go ahead and sit down. Go ahead and sit down. Okay.
It's good I got another swing my
Oh, good.
here.
Well, that was fun.
So I was thinking about coming and how I would introduce myself to all of you. Many of you do already know me, but I was reminded about a time when I took my daughter to a specialist. She had to have a surgery, and we had like 3 sort of pre-op visits or whatever. And the surgeon said to me, "Here's my card. It has all my credentials and my picture on the front, but the good stuff is on the back. The good stuff, like how to get a hold of me and my cell phone number and my office hours, and I want you to get to know me and feel really comfortable about this procedure that you're having, that your daughter's going through." And I thought, that is so smart. Yeah, I don't really care about your pretty picture. I want to get to know you so that I feel comfortable. And I think the same is true whenever we're learning anything or in a new situation for anything. We know it's true for kids that the foundation for any learning we do is about building relationships with them, having that trust and having that respect built. That takes time. And so I sort of feel the same way about what we're about to embark on. We're going to work together over the next few months. So instead of having all of you tell me who you are and what grade of subject you teach, I'd much rather know that I'm committed to getting to know each of you, who you are as a teacher, what your philosophy is, what your approaches are, so that we can kind of get to know each other and build that relationship so that learning can happen. Because I think it's not true just for kids. It's true about life and about relationships in our life. So I'd love for you to kind of get to know me. You can do that by, you can check out my blog, it's breakpedagogy.com. You can follow me on Twitter, you can send me an email, and we can have coffee, whatever works for you. I can make cookies, whatever works for you, because I think it's important to being open to at least just getting to know what you do and how you do it in your classroom. And I want you to know that even though we won't do introductions right now, that we will kind of spend that time together. As I was thinking about coming here, I thought, oh, would I be excited to go and do what we're asking you to do? And I was like, and I'm not so sure, because what I hated most about my time in the classroom was this sort of onslaught of EDU trends, is what I call it, like here today, gone tomorrow PD, right? Where it's like, you learn one thing, but then the next year the title will change, but it'll be the same thing, and then the following year it'll just look a little different, but then we'll throw it in the trash. Like RTI suddenly turned into multi-tiered systems of support, and they said put your kids in groups, and then no, have flexible seating, and then it was like take down the walls and don't have chairs, and then we learned about blooms, and we learned about rigor and relevancy, and we learned about what's depth of knowledge. And it was blended learning, and project-based learning, and personalized learning, and standards-based grading. Oh, no, competency-based grading. And then no grading. And honestly, help me fill in this blank. Doesn't it make you want to say, would everyone please let me just shut my door and teach? Please, right? And the thing is, my fear when this was happening to me would be that I'd be somewhere and someone would ask me something in like an acronym or a protocol, and I wouldn't know what they were talking about, like at a workshop or something. That happened to me one time. I was with a good friend of mine, and she was saying, my daughter's relationship is getting more serious than I thought, she said. And the other day, she was outside, and her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend were enoing in the yard. To which I said, they're enoing! Already? And she started dying laughing, and I was like, oh no, is that stupid? And it turns out, this is an eno, and this is enoing, totally harmless. Yeah. So anyway, it turns out it's harmless. But honestly, I think what we're saying when we have that resistance, when we're like, please don't tell me another thing, or this too shall pass, like let it go. What we're really saying is, please give me my autonomy back, give me my freedom back, give me my creativity back, and let me do what I know how to do really well. That's what it is. That's what it was for me anyways. And I think the thing about that is that the work that we do, the reason why we have that sort of intense need for autonomy is because the work that we do is so important. It's so important, and we know that. And so we want to be able to affect change and to have the autonomy to do that. But the thing is that with that, because it matters so much, that also makes it super hard. Every day is super hard because it's so important and because it matters so much. I think we have a tendency, because we want to affect change so much as teachers, we latch on to things that are neat and tidy. We see a nice, a program that might work well. Ooh, get all of your readers on grade level in 7 steps. And I'm like, ooh, look at that. And we sort of latch on to things because we know that this is so important, and we know that we like things neat and tidy, right? But I think with this autonomy that we get, we have to be really careful, and we have to commit to a process of self-reflection in our career so that we can kind of critically analyze these things that come our way in this barrage of EDU trends, so that we can say, okay, what can I filter against what I know is best for kids, and what can I sort of latch onto, and what can I set aside? Because a lot of times we do things in our field that aren't actually research-based at all. So things like research around learning styles and teaching to different learning styles. No research to back that, but educators latch onto it all the time because it seems like an easy, accessible way to reach kids. Research on brain-based learning shows that it has no impact on children's learning outcomes. Some of the grading practices that we have in classrooms, sometimes late policies or policies around not allowing kids to redo work or resubmit assignments. Research shows it's actually detrimental to their learning, but we latch onto it because it's so rooted in our tradition and because we want things to be a certain way. And so we have to be really careful with the autonomy that we have. Things like homework at the elementary level. No research to show that it impacts learning outcomes at all. Very negligible coefficients up through grade 7. Very negligible correlations in the junior high and high school. But we still, sort of because of routine and tradition, have it as part of our practices. So we need to kind of have this framework to kind of critically analyze and know that if we want the autonomy that we deserve and that we're trained to do this art of teaching, that we sort of have to commit to self-reflection in doing so. The good news is, though, that I think the trend is shifting, and the trend in our district is there. I've met with Dr. Russell and with Liz and all of the principals and with Jen, and they've all said, we want our teachers to have creativity, we want them to do what they can do, we want them to have that autonomy. So that's really good news, but it's also a big responsibility. So what's going to happen over the next few months? I say all of that to kind of just set the stage for what we're about to do. What we're going to do is, today will be a lot, sort of like a mini keynote, a lot of listening to me talk. And after that, it'll be a lot more really diving in, learning strategies, being able to kind of take things back to your classroom. But first, we kind of have to set the stage and figure out where we're each at with elements of rigor, because we know that rigorous learning experiences are already happening all across this building. And we just need to kind of find out what is each of ours next step in the rigorous process. Because we need to kind of do sort of a little pretest, a little bit benchmark assessment of our own practice so that we can know where we can head next. So what's going to happen is today I'll give you sort of a very high-level overview of the elements of rigor. We'll share a common definition and we'll look at very high level of some of those elements. And then my goal is that at the end of the day today, you'll feel equipped to take this very high-level overview. You'll have the slides and you'll have some other tools that we'll talk about, and you'll feel equipped to go back to your classroom and just kind of formatively assess your practice and kind of decide, where am I at with rigor in my classroom as it currently stands today? And then you'll be able to choose one of these elements that we'll talk about to really dive into and say, okay, I think this is my next step. I want to practice this, I want to explore this more, I want to research this more. And over the next few months, we'll spend time really digging in so that you can learn and take things back to your classroom. That's my goal for today. The other thing I'll ask you to do as you move through this learning process is to share your self-reflections with your peers in this building and within the district. And that's going to be a little bit uncomfortable for some, because by nature we're kind of like introverts, and we kind of want to kind of keep our thoughts to ourselves and keep our practice to ourselves. So I'd ask that as you consider the things I'm going to ask you to do, to kind of just remember, what we ask of our kids to do often is to step outside of their comfort zones and do things that don't come naturally to them necessarily, and also to embrace the fact that we know from learning research that learning happens when you're at the edge of your comfort zone. And so consider that immense responsibility that we just talked about, and just kind of keep an open mind about that, knowing that that next step for you is often when you're pushed a little bit to learn and grow and share. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. So as we dig into rigor, just to share sort of a common definition, rigor is really about work that challenges students' thinkings in interesting ways. It's about curiosity. It's about having a sophisticated understanding of things. So it's really about complexity and depth, and less about amount. So rigor is not about the level of text or the level of the content, but it's really more about what students do. And as a result of that, it's individual for each student. And so that's something else to kind of consider. It's measured in the depth of understanding, not whether or not students know something, but it's more about how much they know, how well they know, and what they can do with what they know. So like I showed you on these past couple slides, rigor is about the environment that you set for your students, which is really about expecting all students to learn at high levels. It's also about the opportunities that you provide for your students, which means scenarios where they're able to demonstrate how much they know. If we don't provide those opportunities, we won't have access to know how much they know. So it's about environment and it's about opportunity. And then infused all along in there, we'll need to know that we have to have supports built in. We can't just throw our students into rigorous situations without scaffolds and supports. So that's ensuring that every student has what they need to be able to access those rigorous environments and rigorous opportunities. So a couple things about environment. This is where a lot of the rigor PD lives, so I'm sure nothing I say to you today will be brand new to you. These are all things that you know, but might be thinking about in different ways. So your environment, again, about expecting students to learn at high levels, that has to do with our instructional practices. That has to do with, everything that we know about Bloom's, about depth of knowledge, about how to question students. It's also about engagement, about having students actually engaged in the lesson. Do we require all students to participate, or do we allow only a handful of students to occasionally participate? This is where you see things like project-based learning and inquiry-based learning. So types of learning experiences where students come with questions and then arrive at the need-to-knows throughout their work on the project. It's also about differentiation, which we know a lot about already, which just means differentiating for either content, process, or product in our classrooms. So that's about grouping. That's about whether it's into groups or individually. It's about assessing how ready they are for a scenario, so pre-testing and determining sort of right-size rigor for each student. And it's recognizing that no student is average. And what I mean by that is, I can illustrate with this little story. In World War II, the United States was experiencing high fatality rates in their fighter pilots. And what they discovered through some research was that the cockpits of their fighter jets were built for the average size male, or the average size man. And so through their research and through assessing their pilots, they realized that not one of them was average sized. Many of them had average sized torsos, but a lot of them had, greater than average, longer limbs or larger, head circumference. Not one of them had all average dimensions. So what they found was the cockpit was literally built for no one. And And so think about how often we do that with kids, where we talk about averaging, right? We say, oh, well, what's the average time it should take for a child to finish this assessment? Or we teach to certain grade levels, standards, or we teach to a certain curriculum, product. So when we teach to average, we're really teaching to no one. Environment is also about releasing some control in our classroom, and whenever I say that doesn't that sound fun? Losing control of your classroom? Sounds horrible, right? But the good news is that you can choose as an instructor to choose to give some of your control over to your students. So it's a shift between not losing control, but giving it to your students in different scenarios. And I like to think of it as on a continuum of super teacher controlled to out of control. And we know we don't want to be at either end. It's the continuum of Avery to Parker, is what I call it. Here's an illustration for you. Teacher controlled. Out of control.
That's hysterical.
You have to watch it again because you have to see her judgment of him at the end. Yeah, just the speakers aren't working. Do you want to fix it? Because we'll need it for a video in a little bit. We don't need it for this, but she's like, please don't get any ice cream on me, not a single drop, and he's just obvious. And then she's just like, what is she thinking of him? She's just like,
And tell me which one's your kid.
one of these is mine. Take a guess. Take a guess which one. Yeah.
That's hysterical. I love it.
Oh, was it? Sweet. You have to hook it up for it to work, apparently. What's that? Do it again. Okay. There you go. So releasing control in our classroom, or what I prefer to use is giving some control to our students, is about being flexible in our design. It's being flexible in our thinking about looking at our standards even though we know what we have to teach, we have autonomy over how we teach it. And it's about offering some choice to our students and letting the user sort of decide. If you think about this, the solution for the United States Air Force and Navy wasn't to create small-sized cockpits, medium-sized cockpits, and large-sized cockpits. And it wasn't even, though, create a cockpit for you and you have your own plane, and a cockpit for you and you have your own plane, right? It was adjustable size cockpits, right? Helmets that can be adjusted to fit the size of each pilot's head, seats that can be moved forward and backwards. So when I say personalized learning for your students, everybody thinks, oh great, I'll just make 35 lesson plans, sure. No, we can't, right? And neither can we make an individual fighter jet for every pilot. We have to create situations that are adjustable for our students so the user can decide about how it's best for them to access the curriculum. So those are the kinds of things that when you hear about, Wonder Weeks or Genius Hours in the classrooms, and really looking at your procedures in your classrooms and thinking, what about the things in our day do I do for students that they could do for themselves? And what procedures do I use often that are really for me and not for them? It's also about empowering our students, which means including them in the learning process. It's inviting their voice in, and we know that when we do that, we have enhanced resilience. We have better decision making. We have improved social emotional growth in our students. We have a greater willingness for them to help out and to engage. So that looks like getting student feedback, including their interests in our lesson plans, and involving them in the decision making and appealing to their strengths versus honing in on their weaknesses. And it's really about the question, well, whose learning is this? And kind of being humble enough to say and recognize that it's not mine. Another really tough question that kind of gets at this is if you thought about sitting in your classroom for a day as a PD day, would you want to be there for the day? And kind of putting yourself in your students' shoes and having that empathy to say, what it would be like from their seat. So those are kind of a snippet into environment. Now we're looking at opportunity. So that's about sort of encouraging students to make generalizations about the content that you're learning. It's about asking them to be critical self-reflectors. It's about asking them to provide feedback to one another. It's really about essential questions, and if you think back to student teaching, that lesson plan, it's about can they take what I'm teaching them and transfer it to new and unknown scenarios, because that's the goal, that has to be our goal. Application needs to be our goal versus just knowledge and content mastery. Not to say that knowledge and content is not important, it is, we'll get to that. It's also about asking students to consider, and for us to consider, the greater purpose in what we do. So what is the greater purpose for this lesson plan? And asking students to create and contribute during the tasks that we do for a greater purpose. If you consider, a lot of times, at the end of the week, we send home our work with our students, and we take it out of their backpacks as moms and dads, and we look through it, and we're like, oh, this is so great. And then what do we do with it a lot of times? Throw it back. Recycle. Yeah. Or yeah, you're like, oh, here's all your work for the week. And they're like, yeah. Toss it in the recycle bin, right? And so it's really starting to look at what opportunities can we create for students to contribute to work that has a greater destination than the recycle bin and the trash can. So giving them opportunities to contribute to the real world, and when we do so, their engagement skyrockets, behavior problems plummet, because they have greater purpose for the work that they're doing, and rigor goes way up in the meantime. So it's about those renewable versus disposable assignments. A lot of times people say to me, well, what's more important, content or process? And it is true that knowing things can never be our end game. We always want to say, take that next step and into saying, well, how can I apply what I know? And then even better, how can I take those skills that I've learned and actually do something with them? And so, because just knowing is not enough, right? Just knowing things is not enough. Think about dieting. I know what it takes to lose weight. You must burn more calories than you consume, but it's really hard to apply. And so it's like saying, but that does not, it's not to say that content knowledge is not important. It's exceptionally important. It's like saying, what's more important, the car or the road? Well, they're both really important. But if you have a car and you're not planning on going anywhere ever, the value of that car goes down. Same with the road. If you have a road and you're not ever planning on taking a trip, the value goes down. So you need both working in tandem in real life situations. A lot of times we say we're preparing students for the real world. But in actuality, they are in the real world already. They already have a real world for themselves. And we need to make that accessible to them. Consider this quote from 1949. I'm going to read it to you and consider how true it is still today from 1949. We should not, under the guise of developing literary standards, merely pass on adult weariness. How often have we allowed prescription and standards-based test prep instruction to instill in our students a distaste for reading and writing? If we demand all students read Shakespeare or the Scarlet Letter, and then most of them come to hate reading, if we hammer the 5-paragraph essay into students who wish to never write again, what have we accomplished? And so it's about thinking about what our role here is in the lives of these young children and the bigger purpose, because it's rarely about preparing them for the next grade level or even college. It's much, much bigger than that. If you consider, I just want to share this one more thing, the research shows that predictability of college and high school grades at life, predictability of those grades in life success is equivalent to rolling the dice. In fact, a study of 700 millionaires showed that their average GPA was 2.9.
Wow.
2.9. So it's because we're measuring two different things, right? It's because we sometimes forget about this greater purpose in life. So I want to ask you, and it's going to take just a couple minutes, what exactly is our purpose? And I don't mean, like, what are we doing? not here today in this exact room, but why did you become a teacher? What is our greater purpose at Boynton? Why are we all here? So if you go to this, under the, above the yellow, menti.com on your phone or on your laptop, it's menti.com, and it will just ask you for a code, and the code is right here, 998159, and there'll be little boxes that ask you what your purpose is, and then some words that come to mind. Oh, 998159.
Oh, okay.
998159, it's up at the top now. So the words that are put in more than once get larger.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So you notice these words don't say things like get through all of the 6th grade curriculum, and they don't say prepare them for the Common Core standards, or even to pass, you know, to improve 3 percentile ranks in the NWA assessment. These are about much greater things, and so we kind of have to remember our own purpose, and then highlight that for our students.
It'd be interesting to see what parents report for us.
It's a great point. It's a great point, yeah. And in my opinion, some of the best districts, we kind of have to remember what our role, this is my opinion, off the cuff, what our role is in our communities, and saying like, what kind of people do our communities want us to develop, and what kind of people do we want to develop, because that's where our real role